earlier today, someone who lives in the Galilee had sent me some funnies that I just thought that's a really good way to kind of come against some of the darkness, and that's part of being able to laugh in the midst of, some people call it dark humor, but dark humor can be basically a raising a fist against the darkness, a raising against the sadness, and finding a way to, to laugh, right? And that laughing is a warrior's weapon. It's very important. So anyway, with that, so today we are talking about Parashat Tazria. It's only 2 chapters, but I have to admit, this is one of the hardest 2 chapters to share about. Now, I'm glad to say that in the end, I feel like something kind of came up for me. I just flew back to Canada. We've been a bit jet lagged this week. I don't think we need to go through housekeeping, but let's stay on topic. However, doing the slides, can break that rule because I'm going to jump around just a little bit to hopefully shed some light on this particular 2 chapters. But I'm going to use the Haftorah, and I'm also going to use Numbers chapters 12, where we have Aaron and Miriam. So I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm going to use a couple other sections that aren't 100% part. So I want to show this slide just because I thought it was funny, made me chuckle. Apparently, the first direct flights from Iran to Israel since 1979 were last night. Most of the flights were on the way, much to everyone's joy. But I don't know, it's just kind of cute. And then
they were one-way flights, though. You realize that?
Do you have it in a slide, Gabe?
What's that?
Do you have it in a slide? We're looking for the cartoon.
Do you see it there?
No.
You don't see my screen share at all?
Yeah, we have your intro page, but not the cartoon.
Oh, weird. Let me see. Resume share. Do you see it now?
No.
Okay.
So we see what are the signs we have a problem.
Okay, let's try re-sharing the screen here. Oh, I see. I have some kind of weird thing going on here. What's that about? Okay.
It's the Iranian hackers.
Yeah, they made a deal with the Chinese. All right, can you see this now?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay, and this little joke is that, they published the times for drone entry to Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem, being paralleled with the newspapers that publish the times for the lighting of the candles on Shabbat. It's like a little kind of, that's kind of a very Israeli Jewish cultural joke. All right, let's see here. I need to be able to control my screen here. Okay, there we go. So, having shared that, so today's Parsha is really quite short, and it really has 2 core sections. I split it into 3. The first is the laws that Moses received, or the instructions that Moses received for cleansing, for ritual purity of a woman who delivers a child, a boy and a girl. And the 2 instructions are different. And we've talked about that before. I remember Dina brought actually a really good discussion on that. I'm not going to actually focus on that part of the Parsha today. But, if anybody has any thoughts in our breakout groups, you're welcome to spend a bit of time talking about that if that's something that you wanted to talk about. What I would really like to focus on is some angles on this question of the mark of tzara'at. And so, as you see in my notes below on this slide, I said, well, let's try to play a game today. And it's part of, for those of us who are English speakers and have always been studying the Bible in English, we always use the word leprosy because that has been a traditional translation of tzara'at and metzorah, which is not translatable to English. I don't think there's really any English translation that is satisfying for that word, which is why translators have always fallen back to leprosy. But yet the problem is today we have a very clear definition of leprosy, and it doesn't match up with the biblical broad category of this type of what I actually found the Chabad coverage of the Parsha. They use the term supranatural, which I kind of like that. It's kind of like, it's sort of a special category of disease that has a spiritual origin It's meant as a sign. And so we're going to allow the Torah and the Hebrew scriptures to kind of interpret themselves. And that's why I want to get into Second Kings in the Haftorah. And then also we're going to go past just the end of the Haftorah because there's some interesting details there to help maybe give us a bit of insight onto this mark of tzara'at, which emerges in the skin. It can emerge in the clothing. And that's the second portion where it talks about leather, linen, and yeah, but anyway, fabrics in general. So with that, we're going to try to not use the word leprosy or leper or leprous as we talk about this. Just try to do it. It's not easy to do if you've always talked in English about these things. That's the word that comes to mind. But you can try to use, if you want to try to use the Hebrew, good luck with that. And that's why we have breakout rooms with Hebrew speakers. We can ask them to help us to find the words to talk about it. I used here the mark of tzara'at in English. I think that kind of works for me. I hope that that's an okay transliteration. Okay, so let's go. Now, I also want to focus on using the scriptures themselves a little bit to go through this. So I've actually integrated, I found a cool little plugin in PowerPoint to actually open a website in my slide. So here, let me make sure I'm on the right spot. Okay. Well, so first of all, we're just jumping straight into 13, and we're going to start with the visual details of this mark of tzara'at. The priest shall examine the affection on the skin of the body. If hair in the affected patch is turned white and the affection appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, it is leprous. It is a leprous affection. Again, it's using that word leprosy, but here we want to kind of use, there's a Hebrew concept here that is not equal to leprosy. When the priest sees it, he shall pronounce the person impure. All right. I'm just going to actually jump to my next slide here. So I wanted to use two examples to just dive into this, like how the Bible later refers to these instructions about this outbreak on the skin that has a mark that's distinctive, and that the priests are called to play a role. Aaron and his sons are called to play a role. Now, it's very interesting that in Numbers 12, Aaron himself and Miriam are brought into that story. So Aaron and the Kohanim have to deal with this mark of tzara'at, and yet right away we see Aaron and his wife are hit with this condition, and they have to follow the instructions of the Torah to deal with it. And so I want to just quickly go through this portion just to highlight for our discussion what might be some of the spiritual principles behind what is this mark of tzara'at, and when does it occur, and what is the right solution to it. So here in Numbers 12, we see that Miriam and Aaron, it says, spoke against Moshe because of the Cushite woman he had taken into his house of his wife. Quote, he took a Cushite woman, exclamation mark. They said, has Adonai spoken only through Moses? Has God not spoken through us as well? And Adonai heard what they were saying. Now, I did some research into the commentaries on these two verses, trying to understand better, because there's a backstory here. There's a context. There's some kind of an issue and a conflict that Aaron and Miriam are raising against Moshe and against apparently his decisions with respect to this Cushite woman. I'm not going to. I didn't find any satisfying material there to focus on, but the point is that the Lord heard this interaction, this conversation, this, I don't know if it was a rebuke or this criticism, and then immediately the Lord responded to it. And it also inserts this interesting fact about Moshe didn't defend himself. The Lord intervened because Moshe was very humble. This amazing quote here, more so than any other human on earth. And the Lord came and came to the tent of meeting. I'm just going to summarize here. He told Moshe and Aaron and Miriam to come to the tent of meeting, and then the Lord defended Moshe and said to Aaron and Miriam, specifically, he was speaking to them, "Hear my words. When prophets of Adonai arise among you, I myself, I make myself known to them in a vision. I speak to them in a dream, but not so with Moshe. He is entrusted throughout all my household. With him I speak mouth to mouth plainly and not in riddles, and he beholds the likeness of Adonai. How then did you not shrink from speaking against my servant Moshe?" Still incensed, Adonai departed. As the cloud withdrew from the tent, there was Miriam stricken with snow white scales. And if we look at that, Metzoraat. So Miriam, Metzoraat, Kasheleg. And so right there, we see Miriam is struck with this very condition that we're reading about in this parsha. And then Aaron responds in panic. And Aaron says to Moses, "Oh, my Lord, account not for us the sin which we committed in our folly. Let her not be like a stillbirth which emerges from its mother's womb with half of its flesh eaten away." And so Moses cried out to Adonai saying, "Oh God, please heal her. Pray heal her." And then the Lord speaks this kind of confusing statement about if her father spat in her face, would she not be ashamed? We're going to pass on. So Miriam was shut out of the camp for 7 days, which was the following of this, the 13 of Leviticus that we're reading today as part of our parsha. They followed the instructions, and she had to wait outside. Now, what's interesting is the people did not march until Miriam was readmitted. So there's a collective aspect of how Israel waited for Miriam to be pure after having been healed. And so then she re-entered into, and then they moved on. So that's an interesting thing. Now I want to bring in 2 Kings 5. This is the Haftorah reading for this week. So I'm sure for those of you who've been doing Parsha since you were born, there's nothing new here. But I just want to bring my take on it. And I think it's actually very relevant to the situation we find ourselves in today, where Israel finds themselves today. Israel has enemies today who have taken hostages. You have, a roving army in the south that came into the nation, took people, heinously murdered others. And we're still in a situation where hundreds of people are hostage in Gaza, Israelis who are down there. And this story starts with a very interesting, like Naaman, who is the Syrian. I'm going to find my spot here. Actually, I jumped right down to the end. So actually, I'm going to jump right back up to the beginning. So the 5 verse, right at the beginning here, just because I want to highlight Naaman himself. So Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, was an important man to his Lord and high in his favor, for through him God had granted victory to Aram. But the man, though a great warrior, was, in English, a leper. In Hebrew, it says, well, he was a great warrior, Haya Gibor Chayil, and then Metzorah. Metzorah meaning he had this problem of tzaraat, okay? Once the Arameans were out raiding, they carried off a young girl from the land of Israel, and she became an attendant to Naaman's wife. Now, when I was thinking of this, I was thinking, wow, all of a sudden I see a parallel, a foreign military leader involved in raiding Israeli lands and taking captive members of the nation of Israel. And all of a sudden, this young woman becomes a part of Naaman's house, a house slave, essentially, to his wife. And it's interesting because through the mercy of this young woman, she makes known to Naaman through his wife, I presume. Yeah, she said through his mistress, "I wish the master could come before the prophet in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." First of all, I want to say that strikes me as a little bit of this Moshe flavor of humility. This girl working as a slave in a foreign house who'd been taken away in warfare was doing a kindness to someone that she didn't in any sense owe them anything. She did not owe anything to Naaman to do good to him, to bless him through his wife. or to be concerned for his disease. In fact, I want to present to you the idea the disease that he was suffering from was a symptom of the problem, that he was participating, he was involved in something that was sick, that was unhealthy, that needed to be marked by Hashem. So he had a mark of tzaraat. Now, the solution to that, interestingly enough, was the intercession of this humble Israelite woman who was a light to him and to his family. And so he actually humbled himself in response and went to see the prophet. So we don't have to belabor the points of the details of the story, but just to say that he did follow her instruction. He went to Israel. He went to his king. His king sent letters to Israel. The king of Israel misunderstood the intentions of sending Naaman there. He thought it was some kind of a ruse. And Naaman, no, he had a serious mark from God that needed to be dealt with. And he had to humble himself and obey the words of the prophet and dunk himself in the Jordan, which, as Naaman says himself, this is nothing like the great rivers of my land. This is a nothing river. Why on earth would I do this? And his servant says to him, listen, the prophet has given you something easy to do. If he had given you something difficult, you would do it and think nothing of it. And so Naaman follows the instruction, dunks himself 7 times in the river, and we know the story. He is miraculously healed, which is wonderful. I'm just going to slide down to...
Do you find it's helpful that he has this thing that allows him to scroll through Safari live on
Sorry,
this?
Ruth, your mic is live.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Where am I? Yeah, I'm trying this for the first time, the scrolling thing. It's a little bit, you have to find yourself in the midst of, okay. Okay, so
You
another...
you might want to just point out that when his skin is restored, it's described as
the skin of a little boy right here.
yeah. So we have a little girl and a little boy, and kind of reminds us of yeah.
I also have to admit that I really find it interesting that it says, like here it says Na'ar Katan Vayitar. So like this idea of purity, and interestingly enough, he's a goy. He's not a religious Jew, Israelite. He's not, but here we know it's important to point out that Naaman has a revelation of the God of Israel. And he says, I will worship no other God but the God of Israel. All I ask, and he insists on paying the prophet. This is an important point. The prophet refuses. He says, no, heaven forbid I should receive any payment. Beautiful. And because this point's going to come in later. And then he says, I want to take earth with me so that I can worship the God of Israel over the earth of Israel. So there's like this idea of haaretz. He wants to take Israel with him and worship the God of Israel, which is very beautiful. It's such a beautiful, striking transition from being a foreign military leader who's taking slaves from Israel. He has an encounter essentially with the God of Israel. Miraculously, his heart has changed. Now he wants to be a blessing. But he recognizes he has to go back home and deal with foreign gods. And that's part of the story too, that he asks Elisha to forgive him, that he will have to serve his king, and that will involve leading his king into the temple. It's an interesting detail that you can look into in our discussion group if you want to, because he still had to live in the real world. I guess maybe that's part of the lesson. So where do I want to take this? First of all, this idea that the mark served the purpose when it was matched with humility of taking a goy to the land to encounter a prophet of Israel, Elisha, the big one, at this point in time, and to experience, the kindness of Hashem to heal his wounds, to heal his mark, and that he is changed and becomes a supporter, an encourager, a servant of the God of Israel, which also becomes a blessing to Israel. And then we have an interesting twist. So the Haftorah reading ends essentially right after Elisha gives him the blessing, and Elisha says to Naaman, go in peace. Now, right after that, Gehazi, who is the servant of Elisha, so now I'm outside of the Haftorah, so I've left our packaged little space here, but I think it's a really important detail. Gehazi, who serves Elisha, who is connected to this service of Hashem, he's connected to the Torah, the instruction, and he has a little problem with what happened because Elisha refused to receive payment. And so he says to himself, my masters let that Aramean Naaman off without accepting what he brought. And as God lives, I will run after him and get something from him. So he thinks he knows better, I guess, than Elisha. I mean, he serves, I don't know. Just interesting thought.
It's called temptation.
So Gehazi hurries after Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running, he turns around, he says, is everything okay? All is well, Gehazi replies. My master sent me to say, which is not true. He starts lying. And he tells him he needs silver and clothing. And Naaman says, please, take 2 talents. He gives him the clothing, he gives him the silver. He had brought it with him to pay the prophet anyway. And when Gehazi returns to the citadel, he takes the things from the men, puts them aside, and then he goes into Elisha. And Elisha says to him, where have you been? And he replies, I've gone nowhere. It's hard. It's a dangerous thing to lie to a prophet, especially one who's really on the top of his game. So Elisha says, did not my heart, in Hebrew, actually, it says spirit here, but did not my heart go along with the man who got down from his chariot to meet you? And it's interesting here because the rebuke is this a time to take money in order to buy clothing and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and male and female slaves? Surely the mark of Tzara'at of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants. And so what a harsh rebuke of Gehazi. And I just wanted to highlight that because here we see one person healed and delivered from the mark of Tzara'at, and we see another person who takes on the mark of Tzara'at. And I just thought that was very interesting, to add to our
7 days. And he doesn't get Tzara'at for 7 days.
Yeah, it sounds like a little more permanent. All right, so there we go. All right, now, sorry, there we go. Okay, so now we have 2 cases that we can bring to bear on the Parsha reading of the nega. Here is the Hebrew for the mark or the plague mark of Tzara'at. And the first case is Aaron and Miriam speaking against Moses and his Cushite wife. And the second is this case of Naaman, a foreign warrior who takes an Israelite slave who encounters mercy and meets Elisha. And then we have Gehazi, in contrast, who seeks to get some money out of the situation, is rebuked by Elisha, and takes on a mark of Tzara'at. And so my goal here is to say, what can we learn about Tzara'at beyond, just reading the Parsha literally? What things can we meditate on? Oh, one more thing. I put a little footnote here. Are there any symptoms of the Bilam disease here? I just wanted to connect this for Gehazi in particular. Remember, Bilam, we've studied many times before. I know I'm bringing in another part of the Torah, but he was a great prophet, heard the voice of the Lord, and successfully did so when the Lord spoke to him and said, listen, I'm not cursing Israel. I'm here to bless them. I'm not going to allow you to curse them. And Bilam seemed to have a temptation, as Yair said, to gain wealth and to gain recognition, even though he was not literally going to curse Israel. He was going to try to find a way that he could, anyway, I'm just throwing out that idea that Bilam had a similar challenge, temptation, problem maybe, that Gehazi did. When you start to mix prophetic calling and money making, maybe that's a danger of getting the mark of Tzara'at. Just saying. That would apply to anyone who's in any type of spiritual leadership. You need to take it seriously. So try to collect some thoughts here with some questions. So do these examples of the mark, the nega, the Tzara'at, tell us something about the nature of the condition? So we just went through those 2 examples, Aaron and Miriam, Naaman and Gehazi. And my second question was, okay, so why should the Kohen, why should Aaron and his sons, why should they have a role in A, identifying, and in B, leading to the solution, leading to the cure, leading to the isolation and the dealing with that problem. Like, why would a priest have to deal with that? Because we have doctors that deal. I mean, theoretically, there were people who dealt with diseases in this time as well. There's a different condition, right? So that's what we want to think about. And then the third is I turn the camera on us, and then we ask ourselves, do we, our communities, risk making some of these mistakes and bring a deadly mark of spiritual infection upon ourselves? Do we have a risk of doing that? In the Haftorah reading, we have a servant of Elisha and we have a foreign military leader who essentially switch places. And so just to say that, anyone is at risk of dealing with Sarat, right? And so that would be something to think about, especially in a time where we live in communities that are laced with problems like anti-Semitism and hatred of people that is completely unjustified and toxic and poisonous. And so it's worth thinking about, especially also as Christians dealing with churches that might have a lot of vestigial hatred of Jews, hatred of Judaism. We want to think about those things and identify them and take them seriously when we encounter them, and not just brush them away and act like it's not a big deal. All right, so with that, let's head out into the breakout rooms.
I can just say for room one, we, as a Christian, I had always dismissed the midrash. I thought, but I saw in the discussion and heard that it is very important to consider it. So it's like, I am so glad to be in this group where I can learn about my Jewish brothers and sisters and how they approach life. Was wonderful.
You're great, Mary. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That's wonderful. All right, it's room one. That's a good highlight. Room two. Who's room two? Were we room two?
Dean, come on, lead us.
All right,
No,
Dean.
I can't. I can't. This is really for you to do, Gigir.
Okay, so first of all, I have to say that we really enjoyed Caro, is that a correct pronunciation? Who brought to us Psalms 49. Which we found to be so perfect for describing why those who sought wealth suffered unredeemable destinies, whether it's Bilam or whether it's what's his name, the servant of Elisha. Gehazi. So first of all, I want to thank her for that. That was like so rich and so beautifully shared. So the other thing that I would like to share is that when we discussed the third question, we came to understand that one of the biggest problems that we have today is trying to understand who is redeemable and who is not. It's very, very difficult. Especially in now with the war going on, we ask ourselves, we know that there are so many Iranians who are pro-Israel, who would love to live at peace with us, and then you have a regime that just takes all of its resources for one sole purpose of destroying us. And you have a similar situation with Hamas and the Palestinians. Even if the majority of Palestinians might be completely, but they live under terror, and we've tried so many times to create a situation where they could go so that they could withdraw from this never-ending quest to destroy us. So this is really the big challenge that we face today. How do we distinguish between those that are redeemable and those that are not? And I think much of the internal divide within Israel is exactly that argument. What can we do? So I think that all of us can agree that we really need a leader that we know follows the Torah and will show us how we deal properly with these kinds of very serious questions. And Pesach is a good time for the Elijah to come and to show us that leader. So as we approach our Pesach preparations, we should all pray together that that he will finally come and show us how to deal with a very complicated situation.
I would vote for you, Igor.
Yeah, but
Me too.
we all agree here on that.
Great. So how about room 3? We have one more room.
Physical phenomena comes from non-organic things, from spiritual causes. I brought the example of a very known story from my childhood, which is Pinocchio. When he is telling a lie, his nose grows and everybody sees, right? Okay, so let's think about that. And all of us, not only Pinocchio, have sometimes the phenomena of blushing. And there's a good reason for blushing, right? So those are two things. Another point is at the end we mentioned the social networks in which we find ourselves in the midst of slander and of fake news and of bad talk and whatnot. And there's a very problematic thing happening that these social networks bring us all to talking in the extreme, right, or left, religious or non-religious, and so on and so forth. And as I concluded, is that we do not have a priest over here.
We do not have a what?
A priest, a Kohen. There is no Kohen in Facebook. Nobody tells us. And
That's the
maybe
wrong priest.
we have to find the Kohen inside us before we press enter. That's what I want to say.
That's so
Lovely,
good.
lovely.
That's good.
Terrific.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. Good
Those-
session.
Thank you for such a wonderful session, Gabes, and may everybody have a wonderful week. Shavua tov.
Thank you. Good job.
Have a great week,
Thank you,
everybody.
Gabriel.
Gabriel.